Well, hello everybody, my name's Toby Haydock and this is Happy Times and Places, in which I am challenged by a friend to watch a Doctor Who story, to commentate along, all the while seeing if I can guess what my friend's favourite thing about each episode is.
Hello, I'm Martin Geraghty and I'm one of the long-standing artists on the Doctor Who magazine comic strip, and more recently a member of the animation team on the Missing Episodes productions. Toby has very kindly asked me to contribute to his podcast, and the story I've chosen is The Horror of Fang from 1977, which is one of those base under siege stories that Doctor Who does so well. And it's very probably my most rewatched Doctor Who story, to be honest.
Well, welcome back everybody. That voice that you heard at the beginning was Martin Geraghty, as he said, whose name has appeared, and indeed whose art has appeared in the pages of Doctor Who magazine and on your TV screens if you have seen most of the Doctor Who Missing Episodes animations. So he's a multi-talented fellow. He lives not very far from here, in the strange way that Doctor Who seems to converge on me at the strangest of coincidental times. I'm sure we all feel like that. I'm not saying I'm particularly special, but what I mean is it's odd how, I don't know, I seem to find myself adjacent to Doctor Who people just at times when I then end up working with them, and the adjacentness often has very little to do with it. It's very odd. Martin also lent me his copy of Tomato Cane by Nigel Neal, first edition, which has caused me great terror, because I'm sure I said to him, please don't lend it to me, I'm frightened of losing it, and he lent it to me at the Guinness Book of Records celebration of Doctor Who magazine, which was in London, and he gave it to me in a plastic bag, and I'm like, I've now got to move around London and get a train back to Manchester, and I've woken up a couple of times in the night and gone, where's that book, because I've moved house a couple of times since, and it would just be, and then I've got, found it, but I mean, literally got up at 3 o'clock in the morning to scour the house and go, where did I keep it? And now the book has been re-released. The first edition is still worth an awful lot, but I have a re-released copy for practical usage now. So very high on my to-do list is to give Martin his cursed but very generously lent book back. So that's one or two fewer sleepless nights I can have over the next few decades, because I'm prone to, as I say, at 4 o'clock in the morning suddenly remember something that, oh my god, where is it? Anyway, The Horror of Fang no definite article. Horror of Fang I have on DVD, but I don't even need to go and get it or check that it's there. It is there because I also have it on BritBox, which tells me that I have 23 minutes remaining. I think it's because it started at the end of my last go. So I'm going to watch from the beginning. But however you choose to watch it, I hope that waffle has given you time as we press watch from the beginning, or play, or select, or whatever you want to press on the second episode, which I hope won't find us on the rocks, of the horror. No, not the horror, just horror of Fang Rock. I was racking my brains when watching the first episode, going, why wasn't this always a 10 out of 10 for me? It definitely is now, and it's always been a book I'd had great affection for. So there must have been a time in between sort of getting used to these pictures and reading the book, where I saw it for the first couple of times and found disappointments within it. And I seem to recall, there was always this, the model work was an issue, and the monster's not fantastic, and there's a bit of chitter chatter between Doctor and Monster when everything sort of pauses in the final episode. But I forgive it all of those things now, because I just think there is so much high quality going on as well. And isn't just Tom Baker, and aren't the photos of that, aren't they? Because Colin Douglas is the main guest star. I'm sure there's publicity photos of Tom with Colin Douglas on the viewing gallery part of the of the lighthouse, and it's a great image. Tom Baker staring out from a fog-bound lighthouse. Such a sort of, it's a fairly straightforward, simple set, but it's a great setting, and they've done well to suggest, that we're outside, even though this is an entirely studio-bound story with, a couple of days filming, but also in a studio interior. So I think they do a fantastic job. Yeah, that boat's not great, and there's clearly nobody on it, even though they've dubbed a few screams and bits of dialogue on it. And I remember, because I'd got this, I think, as an edited compilation from Super Channel, and I'd also got another version that had the closing credits. When I sort of copied my version together from the two sources I'd got it from, I didn't want a version with no credits, and the flare was a very useful guide to enable me to edit the cliffhanger in, because it was sort of moving across the sky, and I know I tried it a couple of times and that flare jumped, and I knew I'd got it right when it was perfect, even though there's a change in quality from colour to sort of almost black and white, but I wanted the credits, because especially as things happen with the credits, particularly episode 4 of Horror of Fang Rock. Well, only episode 4, actually, but we'll get to that when I get to episode 4. But I didn't want episode 4's credits to be the only credits I had. One, because I like watching in episodes, and I like the cliffhangers, and I like the credits. But also because episode 4's are atypical. Brilliant acting there from Louise Jameson, who shows that she's quite enjoying doing this novel thing of making the foghorn sound. I'd forgotten that there's a bit of film work with Colin Douglas and John Abbott here in the film studio stuff. I think I just got it in my head that it was Tom Baker and Louise Jason. Colin Douglas reiterating the subtext there that but that's brilliant. But of course, that helps the Doctor, because Colin Douglas is going, cursed electricity wouldn't happen with oil, and the Doctor's going, no, it wouldn't, and this is a monster that has some connection with electricity, which is because this story is very cleverly written. Louise Jameson does lovely little touches that you need actors to do in this multi-camera world, because sometimes they have to get from A to B, or it's largely movement, but occasionally bridging a scene or whatever. And if you keep acting, now there's what looks like a sort of radioactive pea that's with sort of tendrils with snot hanging off it. It's not the most successful creature, the Rutan, but it's largely half glimpsed or miles away, so it's okay. And as I say, I think it probably affected my enjoyment when I first saw this, as I have to be honest, most Doctor Who stories that I'd read first as Target books, took some getting used to when the movies I'd imagined in my head were studio-bound, videotaped drama. But of course now, where I'm so used to this stuff and less self-conscious about it, I'm able to see, reality in what is, I think, to a modern viewer, probably obviously artificial. And I would get annoyed with my past self. This is all beautiful. So we've had the lovely, great stuff in episode 1 where Doctor Who calls Vince Mr. Hawkins and Leela calls him Vince, and he says to Adelaide, I'm Vince Mum, Vince Hawkins, and she says, thank you, Hawkins. She's being nice, she thinks, but that automatically says to us, oh my God, these people are awful. And Colin Douglas looks like he's sort of waiting to come on then, which he also does in Enemy of the World. There's a scene in Enemy of the World where you can see him as Donald Bruce in, I think, episode 2, waiting. So I think we can accept that one, because it could be, he stopped and he's eavesdropping. And in fact, I do read it like that. And I do read it that he's eavesdropping and then he comes in. I don't think it's a miscue. I love that brilliant piece of acting that you've got there, that you've got Tom Baker's Doctor grinning at the ridiculous superstition, and Leela taking it absolutely seriously. It's brilliant, considering these two weren't getting on at this point. Their characters are simpatico, or or not, or they're working at odds with each other, but deliberately so. It's good business from the actors, but it's not antagonistic. That it's the Doctor going, silly old goat, and Leela going, oh, this wise old man has the key to the mysteries. Beautiful. And now that's the famous scene where Tom Baker rushes through the door, and so Paddy Russell holds the camera on Louise Jameson because she wanted him to stay at the door. Adelaide doesn't approve of the Doctor because he puts his feet up. He's so insolent. I like that because he doesn't like them because he knows that somebody on the ship was being a fool. No, but I'm full of ideas. Tom Baker is at the height of his powers in this. And again, I love that he's polite to, he's not just insolent because he's a brooding alien Time Lord. He's, he accords Vince the respect that Vince deserves because he's a nice young man, but also, important to the running of the lighthouse. Whereas these interlopers from the planet Snob, and we get just the little bits of character dynamic we've got there. Skinsale doing his army stories, and Palmerdale showing that he doesn't like him. The wet gentleman is Lord Palmerdale is a brilliant line. And I love the character of Skinsale because we like him. He's quite heroic. He's dryly funny. But actually, he's deeply, deeply flawed. And it's only, it's well written that he's a character who's flawed. But Alan Rowe also makes him terribly likeable. But actually, if you examine what he is and what he does, he's awful. All these people are awful. And it's very clever writing. And I love that the Doctor goes, you want to get to London? You haven't got a chance. I think that's absolutely brilliant. The Doctor makes no pretense of hiding the fact that he thinks these people are god-awful. Interesting casting too. Sean Caffrey was an Irish actor playing the posh lord. He was in Galloping Galaxies and also Edge of Darkness. And Dara Carville, who writes The Bay on ITV, tried to put me in touch with Sean Caffrey when I was doing my Who's Round, but it turned out he was quite poorly, and then Dara got in touch and said actually he's died. So, but he was an actor that had he's got a nice part in Edge of Darkness. He's the one that kills one of the main characters in the first episode. And another Irish actor who I love here, Rio Fanning, who I did interview for Who's Round. Didn't remember being in Doctor Who at all. But an interesting fellow. Now, sadly, no longer with us. He was married to Karen Ford, who was in Grange Hill, and also wrote several episodes of EastEnders under the pseudonym Michael Robates. He also wrote under the name Rio Fanning, but then adopted a pen name to make his tax easier. And he's dragged in the body of Ben, which is important, which we have had seeded in episode 1. Do you think the beast ate him? I love that. But all of what the Rutan is doing is tying in with the idea of this terrible creature, which leads Leela to question in the way that she does. But of course, Doctor Who has a brilliant no. It's not a beast just being a beastly thing. It's doing a post-mortem, and that's a fantastic idea. That the creature is doing something that we understand as 20th, 21st century humans. It makes it all plausible. It gives it a reality, underlining the story of a lighthouse under siege from a glowing golf ball of doom. It gives Vince the idea that there's walking corpses, which then ties in with the superstition element of it, which gives it its atmosphere, even though we kind of know, no, ancient superstitious creatures are nonsense, but futuristic alien ones, they're perfectly plausible. It's this weird sort of duality we always have going on when we're watching Doctor Who, is that it's brilliant, this story, because you spend a lot of time going, well, no, obviously the nonsense old story that the old guy's banging on about is obviously ridiculous. The more sensible explanation is that there's a shape-shifting alien from the far future. I love all of this, hanging from the Yardard Hendriott's mutiny. Brilliant, sort of sardonic Colonel Skinsale. Harker, I love as a character because he's often working class working class or regional characters in Doctor Who are often, can often be slightly arch, slightly overwritten, slightly patronising. Whereas Harker, again, we see the Doctor defer very much to Harker. Harker is really important because he's the practical seaman. I love Vince; he's so sweet. John Abbott is just so likeable, and I love the way that they treat his character. And I love the dynamic between the two of them, which really gives us the deep foreboding that the story needs. Well, this lot don't quite understand what's going on. Vince doesn't understand what's going on in a different way. He's scared of ghosts from the past, whereas these ones have got their mind on completely trivial things that, as it turns out, will lead to most of their downfalls, which is very interesting. Love all of this. And Tom Baker has such a brilliant intensity. And again, like he's been with Vince, sort of saying, Harker, yeah, you've got to get some rest. And Adelaide is wonderful. I love all of that. She doesn't approve of Leela, and Lord Palmerdale ribs her. The economy with which these characters are drawn, and they're all very well cast, is superb. But this, to me, is Doctor Who at its greatest. It goes, what are our assets? We can't do vast sets. Let's set it in a very small area where we just have a few good sets. We can't really show the monster, so let's have a shape-changing one that turns into people or is glimpsed from afar. What does that leave us with? Sort of atmosphere. What creates atmosphere? Well, spooky lines, really good actors. What do really good actors need? Characters that are well written. Okay, I'll write some good characters. I'll write some foreboding, spooky lines, and I'll write an anticipation and fear that, again, the actors kind of have to give us. What makes it Doctor Who? The fact that it's shot through with a sort of mordant wit, and the fact that we got two brilliant leads that we can have, spark off each other with all and give all of the sort of the nonsense, as it were, real depth and import, and drive it with a again, that foreboding that Tom Baker at his brooding best gives it, and Louise Jameson at her sort of absolute insistence on taking the situation seriously, even though she is a character with a sense of humour, so she knows, so she can still keep it light. It's alchemy for me. It's TV gold. I love this story, and the costuming. I mean, she looks fantastic in that costume, and it's just a jumper and a pair of leggings, but she looks practical and she looks of the period and she's sexy. It's great, and Tom Baker just suits that lighter tweed, I think, and that fur lining on the jacket. And it doesn't look too bulky and heavy as he sometimes does. I mean, it's still a brilliant silhouette, but I think this is a particularly fine example of it. And music by Dudley Simpson, not going to do us any harm either. And this is great because, you feel the kind of danger of them going outside. And in fact, they've gone outside a lot more than I remember. I don't really think of, when I think of this story, I don't think of the scene of them with Vince and Reuben in the rocks, and I don't really think of this scene. I think more of, obviously, them being trapped in the lighthouse, but I think it's desperate, and I think it's cunning. Cunning is a great word. It tells you everything you need to know, and look, and that's just. Yeah, we've got the green light and the trademark noise that we're starting to associate with the creature, with the beast. Again, it's economy, it's spooky. We barely say that is more successful than the long shot of the what looks like the Martian's eyeball being pulled out of its socket and dragged across a rocky terrain. And do you really believe that these characters know each other? And Alan Rowe Alan Rowe has been in the Moonbase as Dr. Evans, and he's a fool. I love all of this. I was a fool and a scoundrel, and clear. They've had some sort of arrangement, but Palmerdale's not going to be able to use Skinsale's information. We don't really know much of what all this is about, but I love that. I'm an officer and a gentleman. You're a jumped-up little money grabber for all your title. It's beautiful stuff, and it speaks of sort of class and position, and where different elements of it have different uses. And again, we don't like Palmerdale. He's a prick, but we do like Skinsale, and yet they're both dishonest. But it's because Alan Rowe has such sort of charm, and he's been Edward of Wessex in the Time Warrior, Dr. Evans in the Moonbase. Neither of them particularly brilliant parts, but he's a character actor par excellence, and also the partner of Geoffrey Bayldon, who has not yet been in Doctor Who, but said he was he was spoken to when they were casting it first time round, and obviously turns up as Organon in Creature from the Pit. And I had the pleasure of speaking to Geoffrey at his home, but Alan had died by then. And then Alan comes back in full circle as Gareth. So Alan does 4 Doctor Who's, which is a pretty good and hefty contribution, and all reasonable parts. But I think this is his best one, and he's brilliant in it. And Skinsale is one of my favourite Doctor Who characters, I think. I love this. Tom Baker, I think we're in terrible trouble. Do not be afraid, Doctor. This is so good that there's something about Tom Baker's, sonorous voice and classical acting presence where he can say, I think we're in terrible trouble. And it just resounds in a way that not all doctors, I think, can. And that's no disrespect to them. I love all the doctors, but I do think Tom Baker is so good at the sort of at setting the atmosphere and import. And Ria Fanning gets his lines out in slightly the wrong order here, but it doesn't really matter because he's acting that I've just woken up and I don't quite know where I am rather nicely. So I don't even know if that's a mistake. That might have been a mistaken rehearsal that they sort of kept because it keeps it real. And I like the fact that they don't make a fool of Harker here, and that Palmerdale's so patronising, and Harker just goes, "Oh yeah, you want to get money, and it was all your fault that we." And we hear about the captain, so there were other people on that ship who didn't actually make it, which is pretty grim when you think about it. And I like the fact that Harker kind of goes, "Screw you, you're terrible," and the fact that the survivors from the boat all have their sort of problems with each other adds to the tense dynamic within the lighthouse, and that really helps. And I love this bit. Gentlemen, I've got news for you. This lighthouse is under attack, and by morning we might all be dead. And then he grins. Anyone interested? I mean, only in Doctor Who, because it's not undermining the situation. It's not sending up the situation. It is still deadly serious, but it's a black, mordant humour that somehow Tom Baker can channel in a pitch-perfect way. So he can deliver it like a gag, but it doesn't send up the situation, and it doesn't puncture the atmosphere. What it does is it actually adds to it, because the Doctor is this crazy, unpredictable alien who unsettles these people and who deals with a dangerous situation with this sort of unpredictable humour that kind of adds to the gloom in a way. It makes the black, it makes it a sort of black sardonic fog, enveloping the story in the very language and the very performances that tell it. I think it's so good. Ruben is not really helping Vince here. Going, well, there were three, and two of them died and one went mad. So that's not great for us three guys. But actually, what happens here is that Ruben, having scared Vince, says, "I'll go and do the job that you were supposed to go and do because you're shaking and you're too scared to hold a shovel." But in so doing, that kills Ruben, because Ruben now is about to die, which he wouldn't have done had he stayed up and done the job he was supposed to do and sent Vince. Vince would have gone down and be killed. So he sort of, in scaring Vince, he has sort of saved his life, as it turns out. Not for long, but this silence, or I will cut out your heart. The fact that the Doctor gives that little sort of grin, not of as though he doesn't really sort of approve of it, but he's quite amused that it's happened. So that's actually, this is the last we see of Ruben. Oh no, we see him seeing Ben's body, doesn't he? And the fact that Leela can pick up the fact that it's getting colder because she's Leela, because she's a creature of instinct and blah de blah and used to. So this is the last we see of Ruben, and it's actually quite sweet that what he does is he checks his boiler and he does his job, and that's a lovely bit of character acting business. But he sees Ben's corpse, doesn't he, and gives it the sign of the cross, which is him acknowledging his dead friend and doing the proper, the decent thing. But now he's going to get killed. We don't realise this till the end of the next episode. Well, I suppose we probably do, but this is another unusual episode ending. I don't think the scream is the most convincingly rendered in terms of the way that it's fed into the soundscape, which is a shame. But nonetheless, I still think it's a really interesting episode ending, unlike a typical Doctor Who episode ending, because it's a kind of it's not a moment of imminent danger for the Doctor and Leela, our two heroes, but it is it's a scream in the night. It's a hang on, is something inside the lighthouse. Somebody's gone, and these stories are all about who's going to get picked off next. Now, I don't think you'd expect it to be Ruben, because he's the kind of he's the senior lighthouse guy. But as we will see, it's not as straightforward as that, because suddenly we get elements now of the Thing, before the Thing, and the Thing from Another World that it's based on doesn't quite have the shape changery thing to the extent that the Thing has, where this is a creature that can morph into the bodies, rather cheaply therefore, of the fine character actors that we have in the story. In fact, it doesn't disguise itself as it only actually disguises itself as Ruben, doesn't it? So yeah, they could have done more with that. You probably would now have a sort of few more. Is that really the person that we think it is? We only really get it with Ruben, and it's not, as we will discover, it's not they don't make a big secret of what's going on. They decide to, it's given away long before the brilliant cliffhanger for next week. But nonetheless, it's another dimension to the story that works and that helps to give it its atmosphere, and it gives us next week's cliffhanger, which we will talk about next time. But that is a brilliant and thrilling installment of Doctor Who. So last week I said it was, or last edition I said it was the Terence Dicks script, with the economy. I mean, I could have said that this week as well, with the economy, the foreboding, the characters, the wit. I think this week it has to be. I just think they're on such tip-top form. The Doctor and Leela and the relationship between the two, the way they're written by Dix, the way that their performances seem to gel when they need to, and to be at odds when they need to be. And the fact that we know that actually this is a time when Tom Baker wasn't being particularly nice to Louise Jameson, and yet they still manage to have a great bond between them. They do the dialogue back and forth very, very well, and him going, "We're in trouble," and her going, "Don't worry, we'll postcards, we'll be fine." I love it when Leela sort of reassures the Doctor when he's doing this sort of Doom Lady thing, not because he looks scared, but because that's what she does. That's her job. But also the humour, the fact that they're both acting at times that just gives the scenes an extra little something, like when Ruben's given his beast to Fang Rock stuff and the Doctor's smiling, "This is rubbish," and Leela's going, "Oh my God, this sounds terrible," and then he looks at her and realises that they're both coming from completely different places. His reaction to her, "Silence or I will cut out your heart," that line, "Silence or I will cut out your heart," is glorious. Tom Baker's "This lighthouse is under attack, and by morning we might all be dead. Anyone interested?" is a great line, and it's delivered absolutely perfectly, and then topped off with that dazzling grin. His performance is pitched perfectly of when to be funny, when to be doom laden, and when to be funny, but in a way that the funniness actually kind of helps with the tension rather than undermines it, and yet isn't glib. It's there to help stop the whole thing being too blooming gloomy, but it's still quite mordant and dark. It's there's a sort of cynicism in the face of abject horror that just, again, I think is just pitch perfect. So for me, I mean, I love Tom Baker and Louise Jameson anyway. I love the Doctor and Leela anyway. But I think the alchemy between them, which, partially to do with the writing and partially to do with the performance and maybe partially to do with where they are with each other as actors, and maybe the fact that, throw Paddy Russell into the mix as well, who's not getting on with Tom Baker, admires Louise Jameson. So all of this stuff is all adding to whatever it is going on. But whatever it does not produce, because often, difficult things off screen reflect the on screen product. If anything, I don't know, it seems to help with this, because I think they're on wonderful form. Tom Baker is such a good actor. We forget that sometimes when, he was born to play Doctor Who. He's Tom Baker. He's, I was big in Abu Dhabi, and aunties love me, their titties tingle. You go, yeah, but I would also love to have seen your Titus Andronicus, or whatever. You've got dramatic heft. You've got real wit. You've got real presence. He is when he wants to be. Tom Baker is an actor as strong as any. He just also happens to have been born to play Doctor Who. He's so good. So I think Tom and Louise and their dynamic, the Fourth Doctor and Leela, and that sort of mordant dark wit, encapsulated by this lighthouse is under attack. But so many other things I could have chosen. I love all those characters. I love Skinsale. I love the economy with which their stories are all told. I love Harker. But they're all good, and they all get some brilliant lines. And there's some, the wet gentleman is Lord Farnhamdale. The wit with which Terence Dix peppers the dialogue of his characters, and again the economy with which all of that stuff is done, and the fact that it's a lighthouse under siege, and the atmosphere is creeping in, and the outside is getting scarier and scarier, and soon they're going to have to lock the doors, and they get more enclosed and more enclosed with a rampant beast walking around and picking them off. But no, Doctor and Leela, for all of those reasons, I said, what has Martin Geraghty chosen?
Right, now episode 2. Episode 1, the cliffhanger to episode 1 ends with a thoroughly disreputable but wonderfully realised group of cads and hangers-on crashing into the story in another plot masterstroke by Terence. During his time as script editor on the Pertwee era, Dix often portrayed the Doctor as a kind of clubbable gent, usually on first-name terms with members of the establishment, like Lord Tubby Rowlands, for example, although you don't really know if he's just... if this is all bluster on the part of the Doctor, but it's certainly easy to believe that Pertwee goes and sits in wood-panelled gentlemen's dens drinking port of an evening. But obviously, Tom's Fourth Doctor is a completely different kettle of fish, and Dix manages to invest a character with a barely disguised disdain for the recent castaways, although Tom's alleged bad temper throughout filming probably emphasises this even more. But the introduction of these wonderful characters is a great plot point and just creates more tension and adds to the suspense surrounding the whole location and storyline.
So I like what he described there as barely disguised disdain. I did touch upon that, and it is a key element of the episode, and I love that. Yeah, you want to get to London? You've no chance. The fact that he's not only disdainful of them, he's sort of deliberately cruel in places, and it's that alien detachment which I love, where he sort of loftily presides over people having petty earthly squabbles. And the great thing about Doctor Who as a character and as a programme is it says all your little concerns, all the little hills you want to die on, all the little fiefdoms that you have that buff you up and say how important you are, or all the petty concerns that bother you too much that they make you selfish and avaricious and inquisitive. The Doctor is above all of that, because the Doctor has seen the whole of time and space from the beginning to the end and everything in between, and our petty little fiefdoms and concerns and squabbles are what is it, flea bitings, to him, gnats farts to him, but or them, because the Doctor sees the bigger picture, and so often the limits of humanity are shown when we as human beings fail to see the bigger picture because we're too busy, looking at our own, tiny screen, or even worse, in our own mirror. And I love it when Doctor Who does that, because that is quite aspirational. That says rise above all the things that you think are important, most of which aren't. Now, in Doctor Who, it's usually because there's a marauding alien beastie out there who's going to chew your feet off. But the wider message is, there's a whole universe of wonder out there, as well as a universe of terror. So as well as you should have eyes on the big things that are scary and eat you up, you should also have eyes on the things that make you ascend beyond the sort of confines of your class status, as with these characters, or money, or whatever horrible deal that that Skinsale and Palmerdale have come up with. I love that sort of loftiness that the Doctor has when it is deployed properly, and Tom Baker has that sort of Olympian detachment, which is more appealing to me than. And I know sometimes it's satirised when Pertwee does it, and the Tubby Rowlands thing, could be seen as the Doctor actually taking advantage of that stuff and taking the piss out of it. But Pertwee is a bit more clubbable. He doesn't do the sort of lofty Olympian detachment thing that Baker does at his best, and that's why I think when Baker does it, it has an extra dimension, that the Doctor's eye is on something else, and that's a sort of darker version of the positive message that the show has about reaching for the stars, seeing beyond our confines. It can be sort of used as a weapon against us as well, to sort of go, you are very limited if you allow yourselves to be. and that really helps with those character dynamics. I don't think I can get a point for that, though, can I? I think I was close, but I don't think close, but no cigar, which of course is what the Third Doctor would be smoking with Colonel Skinsale in the club, no doubt. I wonder if they probably knew each other. That's not to diss Pertwee, by the way. I've talked how brilliant Pertwee is and has different qualities. I'm just talking about in this particular area. I think it particularly suits Tom Baker's, maudlin godlikeness, if you can have such a thing, that very much puts us in our place, Russell T Davies, of course, has a slightly different spin on that when he goes, he celebrates the sort of the beans on toast elements of humanity, and that's another great thing as well, to sort of say, yeah, for all the highfalutin stuff, don't be ashamed of enjoying the little simple pleasures either, because the small beautiful things are what life is all about, as another doc said. So it's all complicated, but I love it, and it's interesting, and it's that pull we have between the Doctor Who, which is a show about outer space and the universe, but often made with things you've got in your drawer, and it's the clash of those two things which can sometimes create a wonderful sort of ramshackle harmony, and sometimes can create a sort of thought-provoking dissonance. And both of those things are equally important. And I'm loving talking about Doctor Who in this way, all prompted by a story about just a group of people getting picked off by a monster in a lighthouse. But it's so much more than that. It's a really fine example of Doctor Who from one of its great exponents on the typewriter, and two of its finest regulars, with a flawless guest cast, brilliant director, great design, and it's also a period piece, which I love about it as well, because Doctor Who lends itself to that, and the BBC are very good in it. And my God, it was made in Birmingham. Oh, what the devil was that? Sheer brilliance, that's what it was. Thank you ever so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock, and my special guest is Martin Geraghty, who is far too sensible to be on any social media, but you can find various examples of his prolific work online. I'm grateful to Martin, lovely fella, and to the patrons who make this podcast possible, and they include Martin Cook, Matt Corner, Ben Cowdell, Peter Crocker, Philip Craggs, Lee Kremin, Steve Cunniff, Dave Curran, Simon Curtis, Paul Philip Dahlgren, Matt Dale, Rob Dawson, Chris Davis, Hugh Davies, Robert Davies, Shanti Day, Ian Dean, Tim Dickinson, Drew, Paul Dykes, Andrew East, Jeff Edwards, Andrew Egan, Mark Findlay Smith, Paul Gibbons, David Gillespie, Charles Gears, Ginger Animator, Lisa Glethill, Robin Groan, and Paul J. Guest. The music is by Dave Gates, and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you would like to be included in the names read in the closing credits, well, you can become a patron of Toby Haydock's Time Travels, which is what these podcasts are called. I would think you probably know that. But patronage involves going to patreon.com/Toby Haydock. I feel like an absolute git doing this, but it is the way of these things these days, and it genuinely does help me to spend time doing this stuff properly, and hopefully to a decent technical standard, as well as having proper music and spending time editing these to a standard that makes them hopefully sound and feel professional, and not like somebody popping into an iPhone or some such, and to do things again if they don't quite work, and just generally, I hope, make these broadcastable. And that all takes time. And so the patron model really works for this, and costs you as little as £3 per month. Also helps to keep these ad-free. I mean, I always say this, I would do it ad-free anyway, because I don't really like adverts on podcasts, and that would make me feel a little dirty. And you don't want me sounding like I feel dirty. Well, Well, some of you might, but I'll judge you if you do. But it justifies my decision not to whack adverts in the middle of or at the beginning and ends of these. And yeah, £3 a month is all it takes. That's the lowest tier. That gets you pretty much everything, which is early access to podcasts. Happy Times and Places is 6 months ahead currently, so there's far more in Patronville than there are currently available online on iTunes and all the various outlets. And Too Much Information is about 6 weeks ahead, probably usually a couple of episodes ahead. And Indefinable Magic 2, usually 1 or 2 episodes and maybe a month or so ahead. And there's also Far Too Much Information, which is a podcast that's the sister podcast to Too Much Information, which adds even more arcana into the mix, and that is only for patrons. That is exclusive, as are the monthly AMAs and a few other bits and bobs. And in fact, I recently raided my cassette archive and unearthed a missing Doctor Who related radio broadcast, a Radio 4 tribute to Patrick Troughton done by Jack May off of the Space Pirates. And so patrons actually got to hear some missing material that has since been returned to the BBC archive, but I didn't know it was missing. One of my lovely patrons pointed that out. So there's all sorts of stuff going on in Patreonville, and you get 3 releases a week generally. Now sometimes it's only something that's a couple of minutes long, but it's, you know, I keep churning it out. Churning's a terrible word. That sounds awful, doesn't it? I keep crafting it at a hell of a pace. So that's all at patreon.com/Toby Haydock. You can also do the Ko-fi thing, which is just sort of chucking me a few quid every now and again without having to commit to a monthly thing. It means you don't get any of the, you know, the early stuff or any of that business, but it's a way of contributing if and when you feel, which is also, again, the modern way of doing things. And I am grateful, and I'm aware that I'm sounding increasingly like the cap in my hand is getting bigger and bigger and more vocal. You don't get vocal caps. The words are echoing around it. The metaphor's not important. But what is important is that in these times of change, it's no longer true that any of us have all that much money. So I totally understand if you want to get these for free off the internet. That's how it works these days. But what you can do to help with that is to go to where you get them, iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, and leave a 5-star review. It's really important. Those 5-star reviews really do help the algorithms, and a few positive words of review to entice people to add to the listenership, because obviously the more people are listening, the more it justifies the work and the fact that it's 52 minutes past 1 and I'm recovering from the flu, but I need to get this out and I need to do it nicely. So it justifies all of that, and I am very grateful. So yeah, Patreon, Ko-fi, or just nice words on the internet. 1, 2, or all 3 of those things, extremely gratefully appreciated. And I'm on Twitter at Toby Haydock. These podcasts have their own feed at Haydock Podcasts. And you can follow my comedy club at XS Malarkey, an X and S, the word Malarkey, Malarkey, which is a comedy club in Manchester. I've just come back from there tonight, actually. It was a great show. It's every Tuesday at 8 p.m. in Manchester at the Bread Shed. We have an online presence, twitch.tv/XS Malarkey, but we haven't been doing new shows online recently because there's a lot going on. But if you have friends in Manchester, or if you're passing through Manchester and you like live comedy, XS Malarkey is the place to be. Of course, as I record this, I'd forgotten to say anything. This is the first post Jodie Whittaker recording for Happy Times and Places. I did episode 1 on, I think, the Friday before, maybe a little bit earlier than that, before the Sunday showing. This is the Tuesday after that Sunday showing. So we've just got a new Diamond logo today. They've just had they've just released footage of Ncuti Gatwa sort of answering some basic questions about Doctor Who and proving to be soulful and enthusiastic and humble and charming and just very, very doctorish, and also announcing an affiliation with Disney Plus, where Doctor Who is now going to be worldwide. So lots of exciting developments, but it's nice watching a Diamond logo, because it seems to me that Horror Fang Rock is a confluence of, great Doctor costume, great atmosphere. It's just before the Graham Williams era kicks in, and production wise the series seems to slightly come apart at the seams. So it still has the sort of Hinchcliffe atmosphere and production values, even though it wasn't shot first in the season. It doesn't matter anyway. That's how it feels. It feels like the shadow. Hinchcliffe is casting a big shadow over it, and stylistically all of that stuff is great. And I love that title sequence, and that Diamond logo has been dusted off for the Diamond Jubilee, and that has been announced today. So I've watched a great Doctor Who from the past, while looking forward to this publicity that they start just feeding out, just to keep the excitement going, because they've got a year to do it as well, a year to keep the flame burning. But you just know that they will. And once again, this show continues, even though I'm 48 years old. I'm way beyond the kid that bought the Horror Fang Rock from the Castle bookshop, whenever that must have been, a long time ago. And that was a thrill and an excitement, and to have, I'm pretty sure it was the first Doctor Who book I bought myself, and yet it still connects with something in me that can get just that excited about what is to come, even though we've got a year to wait. But I know that they will keep that excitement coming. And, when they can't, you can listen to me wittering on about old Doctor Who in a cheerful way. I'm sure there are better ways to spend your time, but this is available should you want it. I hope it does not prove to be unworthy of the Diamond logo.